Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel. I am doing yet another book wrap up. I have read some interesting books the past little while, so I'm very excited to talk about them. Let's jump into that. So my lovely Aunt Jen recommended the book The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentil. So the basic part of this story is 4 people hear a scream in a library and one of them is the killer, and I mean, a cool whodunit. But this book ends up being more complicated than that. It ends up being very Inception-y. So this story is actually being written by an author, and you see all of her correspondence and the mystery that's going on there. And then you get the main story, but all of them are authors. And so it very much feels like, what is real? What's happening? I thought that it was kind of an interesting plot device on that. I thought that the most exciting mystery was maybe just in the author of all the stories, kind of what was going on with that. There were times that I was just a little bit confused because I actually listened to this on audiobook, and I feel like on audiobook it was a little confusing to keep track of what story at first. Like, I was like, what story is this all part of the book that's being written, or what's actually happening? But after a while, I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. And I feel like reading it hardcover might be a little more clear. But it was an interesting one. So I read the book Honor by Thrili Umrigar, and this was a lot. This is the story of a journalist who is called to do a story in India about a woman who her brothers burned her husband alive and disfigured her, and she is going back to India to report on this. And the journalist was actually born in India, and you kind of get her story of what India's like, and you get the story of Meena and what her life was about. So you kind of get these 2 women, their stories. You get the dark underside of sexism and religious tension in these smaller places in India, as well as in the bigger towns. And you get a very interesting look and very important topics talked about. Now, for me, I really enjoyed it. I think that the part that just didn't work for me was there was a bit of a romance that went on. And okay, so the journalist that goes there, she goes and travels with this man that is from India, and he is perfect. Like, to the point that it just took me out of the story a little bit. Very much, oh yes, even the things he didn't understand, he was so willing to learn and grow, and he was there to challenge her beliefs and to help her in all the exact right ways that she really needed. And I just thought that it was a little bit like, this character is not a person. Like, he's not a real person. So that took me out of it. I didn't like that element, but overall I thought the story was very engaging and talked about difficult topics really well. And so I enjoyed it. I'm probably not my favorite book ever, but I thought that it did a good job at what it was trying to do. And a huge disappointment, I don't know why, I picked up the Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner, and okay, premise-wise, such an exciting premise. So it's a female apothecary secretly dispenses poisons to liberate women from the men who have wronged them, setting 3 lives across centuries on a dangerous collision course. So you get the story of the apothecary, and you also get the more modern day story of a woman who is discovering the apothecary and piecing together the story. So I thought it could be an interesting commentary. I thought that, I thought that it could be a lot of things. The modern day storyline was, we get our main character who just found out her husband had an affair and is going off on their honeymoon trip on their own, and then realizes, I've never really done anything meaningful in my life, and I wish that I had studied more. And things were so annoying about her character. Why did she think that Cambridge was the only place that you could study? Like, what? I don't know. She was annoying. There was an incident that happened with her husband later on that I'm like, what? That happened? Just the whole storyline with her was off. The storyline with the apothecary I thought was interesting, but I never really felt like any of the issues were explored in a meaningful way, right? Like, you introduce, okay, so she poisons these men that have wronged these women. She says why at a certain point, but you're like, oh, that's the reason that you poisoned all these people? And okay, that didn't feel like a motive to me, but it never explored maybe really the toll of, you know, murdering people, other than maybe my sickness is a symptom of my black art. Like, that was the extent of the exploration there. And it just I never felt like it was explored in a meaningful way, you know, like how men treat women, or, you know, like the historical context. I don't know. This book, I feel like, had a lot of potential, but when it came down to it, I'm like, why did I bother reading this? Oh, and also there's like a 12-year-old girl who is just perfectly fine with the idea of murder and magic or whatever. Like, that seemed super weird to me. Super just not realistic. There were lots of things that I'm like, this just doesn't work at all. So a super interesting book that I read was The Lost City of the Monkey God by Douglas Preston. This is following the discovery of a city in Honduras and kind of the history of the search for the study and the modern technology that made it possible. And this man's a journalist who went along on these treks to go find this city in the dense jungle. And it was interesting. The very first part of this book, like the beginning, felt a little like Indiana Jonesy in a slightly, like, made me slightly uncomfortable with the kind of colonialist vibes that it was giving. It was very much, we are gonna go out and we're gonna find this treasure and it's gonna be amazing kind of feel, like the first part of the book, okay? So that was fun, but I kept trying to, like, calm myself down. It's not really colonialist. They're trying to go through good channels, especially the more modern attempts. There was a history of, you know, people looking for the lost city with bad intentions. But, you know, the more modern attempts, they're trying to, you know, they're involving the government in Honduras, and, like, I get it, right? Very Indiana Jones. Then they find the city, all right? That's where everything shifts in this book. So they find the city. Then we start having an outcry of professionals saying, this seems a little colonialist to us. And the journalists in this book trying to refute those claims. We get a section kind of that, right? And no, we are doing our best to preserve this history, which, I mean, you can judge for yourself on that, how well that happened, right? Then half of everyone who went on the expedition ended up getting a horrible jungle disease. And most of the last part of the book is them trying to get treated for this horrible jungle disease that they all got from, like, sandflies. And part of me was like, well, serves you right for disturbing this lost city. But also, that's a really mean part of me. I mean, they got a horrible disease. But it's also interesting to note that a lot of people, the reason we don't have good cures for the disease that they had was because the people who get this disease are the most poor people in the world. They don't have access to good health care. These rich explorers getting this disease kind of was like, sounds fair. Even though, I mean, awful. I hope that they all have recovered well and that it hasn't, you know, eaten their face like the disease apparently can do. So that was a big chunk of the book. And then he talks a lot about the history of pandemics and how disease has spread, and what killed off many of the native peoples in the America was the disease, and why that happened. And that was super interesting. I realized this book was published in 2017, and he talked a lot about we're due for the next big pandemic and nobody's gonna be prepared for it. It's gonna kill lots of people. And that was weird in today's day and age to read about, so that was interesting. Overall, I enjoyed my time with this book. I mean, you get the adventure story, you get some self-reflection, you get a disease narrative. I don't really know, but the author is trying really hard to tie it all back into what these people's lives would have looked like. And I thought it was an interesting look at early America. So anyways, I recommend it just because I thought it was interesting. I didn't know anything about this, and I was interested to see where this book ended up. And those are the books I've read the last little while. So if you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know if you liked them, didn't like them, what was I missing, and I will see you all on the next one.